Hi, welcome to another Gadgets and Facts video. Air India. Pretty much everyone knows about these airlines, but nobody wants to fly with them because of their bad reputation and customer service. But they are one of the pioneers in modern aviation and also one of the best and most respected airlines in the last decade. So, how everything turned upside down? Before getting into those details, let's see how it all started. In this video, we will talk about history of Air India and how from being one of the top airlines in the world, it became the airlines to what it is today. Also, we will try to find out some of the industry experts' suggestion which could change its future. So let's get started. Air India was founded in 1932 as Tata Airlines by famous industrialist J.R.D. Tata. It grew into an international airline owned by the Indian government. The first scheduled service was inaugurated in 1932 by flying mail and passengers between Karachi, Ahmedabad, Bombay and Madras. By 1939, routes has been extended to other cities as well. After World War II, Tata Airlines was converted into a public company and renamed Air India Limited. 2 years later, it started its international services between Bombay, which is now called Mumbai, and London. In 1953, India nationalized all its Indian carriers, creating two corporations, one for domestic service, which is called Indian Airlines Corporation, by merging Air India Limited with six lesser airlines, and one for international service. Air India International Corporation is called. It was later renamed to Air India in 1962. In the following decades, as India's flag carrier, the airline extended its international routes to all continents except South America and Australia, and it expanded its cargo operation along the way as well. Now let's talk about the good times of Air India. In the early 1970s, the government of Singapore, led by Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, had a great idea. In order to attract investment into the little island nation, it thought of starting an international airline that would act as a kind of flying advertisement for Singapore and its world-class capabilities. It would do this by demonstrating to decision makers around the world a level of excellence that they had never experienced from the top global airlines of the time. It was a brilliant idea, but this new Singapore Airlines would obviously need to collaborate with existing airlines from which it would acquire the necessary know-how and service standards. The authorities made a short list of world's best airlines and finally zeroed in one of them, and to your surprise, that was Air India. Asian carriers like Singapore Airlines, Cathay Pacific and Thai Airways began to dominate the skies in the 70s by redefining the concept of service. But the very first Asian airline to do so was Air India, which provided the inspiration for all other right from the 1940s. Over the next 30 years, Air India became known as one of the world's finest airlines. It may have been small compared with its giant global competitors, but it had the kind of service that the other airlines envy. Just one example of this was the fact that when in the 1950s British Airways introduced a jet service that cut a few hours of the trip, people still preferred to fly by Air India's slower propeller-driven aircraft simply because of the way they were pampered on board. Air India's finest service was on its transatlantic flights. The main reason behind Air India's superlative service was its founder J.R.D. Tata himself. He used to micromanage everything in the nicest possible way. He was notorious, for example, for wondering about flights, making notes of tiny details that needed to be fixed, from the level to which the wine was poured into a wine glass to the hairstyle of the air hostess. If he saw a dirty airline counter, he would shame everyone by requesting a duster and wiping it himself. And on at least one occasion, He rolled up his sleeves and helped the crew clean up a dirty aircraft toilet as well. It was his microscopic eye detail that inspired, rather terrified the Air India staff into performing the way beyond the ordinary call of duty. So, how it all started failing? Not everything was going well for Air India in the start of the millennium. Air India international operation clocked a very small profit of just around 16 crore INR, that is around 3 million US dollar in the year 2005 and 6, while Indian Airlines, that is the domestic operation, posted around $10 million profit. They had combined debt of about 5,000 crore, which is close to 1 billion US dollar, and by this time there was no financial support required from the government. Then the drastic thing happened. In 2007, the Congress-led UPA government decided to merge the two airlines and ordered planes worth more than 50,000 crore, which is equivalent to around 10 billion US dollar. The airline took heavy debt to purchase these planes while employees agitated over wage disparities. Air India never recovered from this chaos. Federal Investigation Agency (CBI) started inquiring into the plane order and the merger. Till 2010, the airline kept paying for these planes from its internal resources and loans, many of which it did not even need. As the National Auditor pointed out in 2011, it eventually sold 5 of its Boeing 777s to Etihad Airways at a significantly lower price than the market value. New wage agreements were signed to improve employee salaries, but all this meant more distraction and more loans to fly in a new environment where private airlines including Jet Airways, Kingfisher Airlines, Indigo were expanding rapidly. The Ministry of Aviation also gave hundreds of flying rights to foreign airlines that pushed Air India further down the hole. With the financial burden of 111 aircraft and working capital loans, the airline's debt ballooned from just $1 billion in the year 2005 and 6 to $10 billion in just 10 years. In 2011, the airline reached a point that it could not pay the salaries on time for its employees. Then the UPA government agreed to provide Air India about $6 billion in equity funding spread over a decade. This was basically the Indian taxpayers' money spent on Air India to keep it afloat. Over the years, Air India management tried multiple times to get back into profit. The newly appointed BJP government tried to change the situation with Air India by trying to explore several options. Every month, Air India's expenses are 3 to 400 crore more than its revenue. To bridge this gap, it borrows routinely from the government. For better terms for loans and equity infusion, it has to go to the finance ministry. In the past few months, there has been discussion to convert Air India's debt into equity. But the banks led by State Bank of India are not at all convinced, as they are already loaded with bad loans, including those given by Kingfisher Airlines. It was during this discussion with Finance Minister that it was decided current government in power to privatize the Air India and called for bids. During May 2018, Air India had 12.8% domestic market share behind market leader Indigo Airlines, which is having around 41% market share. The national carrier's current net debt of over 50,000 crore. Sadly, the government, which was hoping to divest 76% stake in Air India, didn't find any takers and had to put off the sale. The key step for revival will be to restructure the huge debt of the airline and take off the debt burden from the airline's books and save on interest costs. Former Jet Airways CEO Mr. Steve Forty said the government should allow professionals to take over and run the airline. It will be very painful at the first, with manpower, fleet and route reductions, but then as the airline will slowly emerge from the darkness,
it will have a chance to grow again in a profitable way.
The Sarkari culture at the airline has to go, and an aviation professional, not an Indian administrative service official, should be given charge to run the airline. The airline is also forced to serve several loss-making routes because of compulsion from the government. This also has to change, and the government must keep a hands-off approach and let professionals run the airline if it wants to revive Air India. Another senior executive at a no-frills carrier said the cost structure at Air India, which is essentially a full-service carrier, is one of the highest in the industry and need to be examined immediately. For instance, some of the contracts at Air India, including ones for maintenance, are much higher than that paid by the no-frill carriers, and national carrier will have to bargain like a no-frill carrier with its vendors and other facilitators to keep the cost down. The Air India official cited earlier said a proper valuation exercise should be done and conducted by a reputed international valuer who has helped in a similar airline privatization and understands this space to make sure assets don't go cheap. However, Air India can no longer bank on perpetual government support as private airlines steadily eat into its market share. I hope Air India gets back into its glory days as soon as possible. I don't know how soon that will happen, but what is sure is that if you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell icon, you will always receive the latest aviation videos as soon as it's published. Let me know what you think about this video in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.